Hello everybody, my name is Zen, and it's time to talk about Minecraft Dungeons, which is not out yet. It comes out on May 26th. This is the beta that you're seeing in the background, and the beta itself is not fully complete. It's just a little tiny bit of the game, but the beta does give an idea of how the game actually plays and the systems within it, but we can't really tell how the end game will play out in the game or how the story parts will play out. I'm not really going to be commenting too much on the story parts, so don't worry about any spoilers, but I am going to discuss heavily the gameplay of Minecraft Dungeons. For anyone who doesn't know me and is just stumbling upon the channel, you have to know that I really love action RPGs. They are my jam. It's one of my favorite genres of games. I think that, Diablo and Path of Exile and stuff like that are really freaking cool, and I put a lot of time into those. In fact, on the Diablo side of things, I currently am the lead of content on DiabloFans.com, which is the biggest Diablo fan site out there for builds and guides and all that stuff, and also just general Diablo news. So, I am pretty embedded in the action RPG community, and I really love playing different action RPGs. So when Minecraft Dungeons was announced, you could pretty much imagine how excited I was. I was like, this looks really cool. It's a cool concept, and I'm excited to see what they do with it. So with that said, I have quite a bit of experience here, and I'm going to be talking from that experience and comparing Minecraft Dungeons to these other action RPGs, because that's the most fair thing to do. It by itself is an action RPG. It is trying to do cool new things, so let's figure out whether those things work and if the game is any fun. So let's start at the most logical part of an action RPG, which is the action, right? Is the gameplay any good? If you look at any good action RPG out there, Diablo or Path of Exile or Grim Dawn, all of those games are carried by the fact that they have excellent combat, some better than others, and there are action RPGs out there that try different things to make their game seem a lot more interesting, even though the combat isn't quite as tight. The Van Helsing games, the Van Helsing series of action RPG games is really cool. There's some awesome concepts in there, but the combat is not nearly as tight as something like Diablo 3. So if the combat, which is something that is the basic part of the game, does not feel good, the rest of the game isn't going to feel good. You're not going to want to actually finish the game because you're not going to feel like the moment-to-moment gameplay is any good. So, a good example of this is Diablo 4, game that is not out yet. But I can confirm that the gameplay on it feels really freaking good. It is a fun game to play. Even in its early development, they have gone through and made that game excellent, at least from a gameplay perspective. And that's just moment-to-moment gameplay. That's not talking about gearing. That's not talking about skills or anything. That's just, does it feel good to play? And the answer is yes. So Minecraft Dungeons, even though it's in beta, has to answer that question. And that thing, that combat, whether it's good or not, needs to be good from the beginning, even before beta. Otherwise, they've got major problems. And what I can say about that from my experience thus far is that Minecraft Dungeons does feel really good to play. There aren't any particular things that really stand out to me as ooh, I love using that ability. To go back to the Diablo 4 reference, you look at the Barbarian during their little test at BlizzCon. It had this cool conal slam ability that it could do, and just using that ability was the most enjoyable thing about that demo. That ability felt so good to use, and it always felt like it had big impact. I don't really feel like that is the case in the majority of Minecraft Dungeons. However, the moment-to-moment gameplay does feel good to use. It's responsive. At no point do I feel like the character is doing things that I'm not telling it to do or commanding it to do through input. And at the same time, attacking different characters, attacking the different enemies feels really good because they are doing something that I recently discussed in my Doom Eternal video, which is that they have combat chess going on. They have different pieces on the board. They have zombies and creepers and skeletons and all of these characters, these enemies, play a vital role in how you approach combat. If there is a creeper, for example, you could run up and attack it and do some damage and then kill it before it blows up. Normal Minecraft stuff, right? That should be expected. Or you could shoot it with a bow and kill it from range. But if there's a creeper and 3 skeletons and like a super zombie that is guarding the way, and they're all in front of the creeper, but the creeper's running at you with them, so you can't shoot the creeper. So therefore you have to consider how you're moving about the battlefield in order to kill the creeper before it gets there. Like, all of this stuff is happening within an instant in your brain. You're trying to determine the most strategic way to take out certain targets, because the creeper is going to wreck your world. When that thing blows up, it does a lot of damage. And the result is that there is a bit of combat chess going on. You have to consider how you're going to handle skeletons, how you're going to handle creepers or zombies or illagers or anything like this, because these creatures in this game are dangerous. And they each have their own minor effects. And when you have a bunch of them on screen at any given time, you have to consider how you're going about the battlefield, because if you do it wrong, you're going to take a lot of damage and you're probably going to go down. If you're doing correctly, then you're going to feel really good by the end of combat, because you're like, I conquered that. That was a difficult encounter, and I conquered it. So yes, at its core, the gameplay feels really good to play. And it is backed up by a really interesting gearing system. In fact, the game is class agnostic. It has no classes. You just join in the game with, making a character is kind of you get to pick like how you want your character to look vaguely, and then you just jump into the game and you start playing. You don't pick a class. This is not Diablo. You're not going to pick a wizard and suddenly start throwing spells. It does take the Minecraft idea of you just jumping into the world, and sometimes you just got a sword and you got to deal with that until you get more gear. And that's really cool because of the gearing system that they have decided to go with. The way it works is, instead of giving you a class with a set of abilities and then your gear upgrades the damage that you're doing at any given point, they have decided to go with this class agnostic system where your gear has abilities on it, which means that as you gain gear, you're going to be looking for certain abilities on certain pieces of gear depending on your playstyle, right? Like if you're the kind of person who wants to be like a ranger, you're going to be using a bow, you're going to be shooting from range, then you're going to be looking for bows that have the correct skills on them that you want. And I'll explain how that system works in just a second. But you're also going to be looking for gear that backs up that gameplay. Like a piece of armor that may give you a chance to, recover arrows anytime you shoot them. Because yes, in Minecraft Dungeons, you do have ammo, and you have to conserve that ammo a tiny bit. If you're, just shooting arrows willy-nilly, you're going to run out of arrows. But if you have the gear to support you shooting a bunch of arrows and being able to restore some of those and not always losing them when you shoot one, then you'll be able to make a ranger build and actually use your bow more often and more effectively. But that comes at the expense of you not then having abilities on your gear that are going to give you, melee damage or defensive capabilities and stuff like that. And it's this cool self-balancing agnostic system that allows you to make the character that you wish to play. Do you want to be a sword-wielding character that smites undead foes and has a bunch of defensive capabilities? Then you could do that. Or you could be a ranger that jumps in real quick and attacks with daggers when they need to, but for the most part stays at range and snipes off really difficult enemies. This is all possible. You can make the character that you want to play, and that is freaking amazing. The reason why is because when you look at how the end game progression of an action RPG works, you look at Diablo or whatnot. In Diablo, it's actually a good example. You get to max level, you start farming, and in Diablo 3, you're just farming set pieces. You're just trying to get, your set pieces that you need for a particular build and the supporting pieces around it. So you spend most of your time finding those set pieces, and once you find them, that's it. You're just trying to find better versions of it. And oftentimes the pieces that you're picking up are absolute garbage. You're getting a lot of loot that is absolute garbage, and you're just getting rid of it. You're just kind of filtering it through the lens of what works best for my build, or what works best for supporting builds that I can do in conjunction with this, and getting the right items for that. But in Minecraft Dungeons, currently how it plays with its gearing system, keeping in mind that The end game is not available to play right now. You're not going to get to the end of the game and see how that works. But for the most part, we can determine based on how the gear system works, how that will end up playing out, which is that you're going to get random pieces of gear. And any piece of gear that you get might be really good because it might have the set of skills on it that you are looking for. And these skills come in different tiers. And what happens is whenever you level up, you get an enchantment point. And you spend these enchantment points to get the skill on the gear. And different pieces of gear can have multiple skills on them. Like a piece of armor can have up to 3 abilities on it that you can get, and each of those little slots, let's call them ability slots just for the sake of conversation, each of the 3 ability slots have 2 to 3 or 4 choices on them that you can pick. But once you pick that one, that's it. You don't you don't get to pick the other 4 or 3 options or whatever it may be unless you go on to ability slot number 2. Then you can pick whatever randomized there. The way this ends up playing out is that as you're playing the game, just leveling up and in basic combat and whatnot, you're going through and you pick up an item that has a power level that's greater than what you currently have, and you go, ooh, what's that, right? You open up your inventory and you look at the skills and you go, ooh, I could use that one skill because I have a really good sword and that is really going to help with the build that I have. Or I have a really good bow and that synergizes, the ability on this piece of gear synergizes with my ability on my bow. And then I could put this gear together and really enjoy that. And that's just low level play, just running around. And every piece feels exciting to get. Every new good piece feels exciting to get. You do often get pieces of gear that are of a reduced power level, which is just it's basically just a number on the gear to tell you how good the piece is compared to, other pieces of gear. It's kind of like, if you play World of Warcraft, it's like item level. Higher power level gear is going to come with higher level stuff on it. But for the most part, it doesn't really matter that much. You're just kind of slowly going through the gearing process. And I imagine once you get to max level and you're kind of in the end game version of Minecraft Dungeons, then yeah, you're going to be getting a lot of pieces of gear that have, progressively higher power levels until you kind of reach the max for that. And then you're hunting down specific pieces with your gear that you want or with your abilities you want. And it's probably going to take a while for you to find the specific abilities that you want to have on your gear, so on and so forth. So it does appear that Minecraft Dungeons has a long tail when it comes to its gearing system. But I just find the whole thing fascinating and exciting because it makes gearing fun. Like I said, any piece that you're picking up while you're leveling up feels exciting. You're not just equipping it because it has a higher power level. You're equipping it and considering, wait, is this actually better? Because the ability I'm using right now really works with how I want to play the game versus how, this ability changes it. But you could just roll with the punches and be like, look, these 2 items I picked up have really good bow skills on them. And I've been using a sword that's okay, but, hey, let's try using a bow. And you can kind of change up your gameplay. It, in a way, reminds me of how Diablo 3 legendaries, at least while you're leveling, work to change up your gameplay. You're like, oh, suddenly I got this awesome legendary that imbues this one skill that I wasn't using because I was using this other stuff. And, let's try that out. Let's see if that is any better. And you get the opportunity to, switch up your gear. And I think that's really, really fun. The nice part is in conjunction with these enchantment points that you're getting and that you're putting into gear, right? You're investing them in a piece of gear. You can then take that piece of gear when you're done and you can salvage it. And you can gain those enchantment points back. But it deletes the piece of gear, but you gain your points back in order to invest those in other pieces. I think that is so cool because each of the enchantments that you could potentially get on a piece of gear, are randomized. And if you happen to have a good one that you have on, but you manage to pick up a slightly better one because it has better enchantments or the, enchantments that you're more looking for, you can get rid of that piece of gear, that is technically a downgrade and go get the upgrade, get your enchantment points back and put them in the new piece of gear. So it works in a cool recycling way where you're constantly moving forward with your gear. But I imagine that once you get high level and you have a bunch of enchantment points, you're going to have multiple sets of gear that you can put your points into. And that's cool too, because that gives you different stages of gameplay and gearing. And that works really well on a high level version of like, how an action RPG will play out over the course of, 100 hours, let's say. And then something that you may have noticed if you're watching in the background, your 1, 2, and 3 keys are set by a piece of gear that you've picked up. So you could get, for example, like boots of swiftness. And when you use them, it gives you a small speed boost. You're like, woo, and you run really fast for a couple seconds. Or you could get something like a fishing rod, which I think is really funny, and use the fishing rod to grab an enemy and pull them to you and stun them. And that's really cool. Or you could get like a meat haunch and summon a dog. So, suddenly you have a pet that is out helping you. Or you could get things like, war horns that knock enemies back. And there's a bunch of different little tiny equipment slots that you can get that alter your gameplay. And of course, those also have power level on them, and the higher power level they are, the better they are. So like if you get a high power level wolf haunch or meat haunch, then the wolf is going to be much more powerful. So that way, as you're going throughout the game, you're getting more power levels, and the wolf is keeping up with you as you're able to get better and better meat haunches. So you're always feeling like you're getting cool upgrades as far as that is concerned, and it's altering the way that you play the game, at least while leveling up. Again, I imagine once you reach max level and you're kind of doing the quote-unquote end game of Minecraft Dungeons, you'll be hunting specific equipment slots there. The good news is, again, when you remove an item, you salvage an item, you're gaining emeralds. And just in general, while playing the game, you're getting emeralds. And these emeralds, the best way I could describe them is a currency much like blood shards in Diablo 3. You use them to randomize items. So you'll go back to essentially your home, and there'll be a vendor there, and you can go talk to the vendor, and it'll give you a random item around your power level that could be, either one of the 3, like little 1, 2, 3 equipment slot things. You can go choose there's a vendor specifically that sells you that stuff for a little bit more, or there's a blacksmith that will give you a piece of gear, like a weapon or some armor, that will be able to, adjust or upgrade the stuff that you have. So you can spend your emeralds to get random pieces of gear, and that's cool because the gambling part of Kadala, or the blood shards in Diablo 3, really works to always give you something to go and try for. You're trying to get a really solid item out of those. Sometimes you get really lucky, and it feels good when you get lucky and you get like an artifact item or a rare item or whatever you want to call it. In fact, Minecraft Dungeons does have like legendary items with cool effects on them. So far, I've gotten a set of sickles, a really cool like 2-handed sword that was really good at smiting undead, and then I got a bow that shot multiple shots. So like each of those items obviously has cool effects on them that come into play when you're wearing it. So like the bow, for example, it would shoot an additional projectile just on its own. Like I didn't have to do anything. Anytime I shot a projectile, it would shoot a second one at the nearest enemy. And that's just really cool because that shows that they understand that gear needs to have variance in it and needs to be able to alter your gameplay. So if we look at the game from this perspective, you've got your gear that is altering how you're playing because it's giving you different enchantments or skills or whatever you want to call it as you gain different gear and put points into it and you invest experience into those pieces. So you have that on top of the fact that you have these 3 little equipment slots that you're able to put customizable things in, the boots of swiftness, the meat haunch for the wolf, or, the fishing rod, stuff like that. So you're combining the gear that you're getting with those little equipment slots on top of the enchantments that you're putting your enchantment points into. All of this combined makes an interesting system of gearing up that is really, really fun to do. It makes every piece of gear exciting, and it makes that, the leveling experience, the core gameplay experience fun because you're constantly getting cool new things to tinker around with or mess around with, and it always has something for you to strive for. You know, you're always going to want to try to get the best enchantments that you can on a set of gear for the gameplay style that you want to do, or, you know, I'm sure that there'll be by far some really overpowered builds by the end of the leveling experience in the end game, and you're going to be searching for those specific things. And that's really cool because that pairs well with the combat chest they have going on. You know, you're keeping in mind all of the enchantments and skills and everything that you have equipped with how you have to handle certain enemies in the game, because those enemies are requiring you to stop and think about any given encounter, because things can be really dangerous. And speaking of danger, you can play the game at a easy level where you can just go through and just mindlessly farm stuff. That's totally acceptable, which means young children are able to jump in the game and enjoy an action RPG that's like Diablo without having to worry about, I don't know, blood and gore and general Diablo things, or more adult themes, as opposed to, you know, things like Minecraft where it isn't really adult themed at all. So those kids can jump in and play an action RPG without much of any issue with, you know, parental guidance. And then on top of that, it's just easy to play, but it has really cool, deep systems to engage with. So you're teaching kids, you know, like, here's how you play an action RPG. Here's some really cool systems that as you play the game and you learn the game, you're going to get good with, and you're learning really ideal gameplay development, which is cool. You know, you're diving into deep systems that are easy to learn and have a lot of depth with them, that you're able to continue to use them over the course of, you know, tens or hundreds of hours. And I think the final thing that I want to mention as far as gameplay is concerned is that Minecraft Dungeons does in fact have a combat role. You dodge on the computer with spacebar, for example. This is something that we're seeing a lot more action RPGs do. Diablo 4, for example, does have a combat role. I mean, Diablo 3 also has it on console. You use the right joystick on the controller to dodge out of the way. And this is cool because it means that you can be a little bit more reactive with how you move around and how you avoid certain, you know, damaging abilities from enemies. And I like that. It's, you know, Minecraft Dungeons is certainly not the first action RPG to include a combat role, but it does a good job of implementing it where you feel like it is a useful thing to use. And in fact, there is a little bit of nuance to it, because when you do combat role, you move slowly for a couple seconds afterwards. So it's not necessarily like, I'm going to use it to move really quick. They know that there needs to be a drawback to using it. You need to be using it to get out of range of something, but some gear does augment it. You know, you can have, for example, an enchantment that makes it so when you combat roll, you throw fire down below you, and it's you know, like a line of fire. So any enemy that steps into that or is in that is now taking fire damage every second. And I think that's a cool little ability, you know, augment not only the other stuff that you have going on, but your basic, you know, combat roll, your dodging roll. And I like that a lot. On top of that, you've got things like potions that are dropping and pieces of meat that are dropping from enemies. Pieces of meat can, or like apples and whatnot, can heal you over time. So you're picking those up and healing. Those are shared with party members in multiplayer. So if there's multiple, you know, potions or stuff down, you would want to, if you're playing on a high difficulty, considering, you know, who's getting what. And then on top of that, you've got you know, things like the TNT that are dropping from enemies, that when you right click, you throw the TNT. So any enemy and ally sitting in it does take a bunch of damage. So you need to kind of use those strategically and not just kind of throw them willy nilly, especially if you're playing with friends, because it's really easy to kill your party because they're not paying attention to the fact that you have a TNT. And let's jump into group play a little bit, because as I mentioned earlier, yeah, you can turn the game difficulty down to make it easier, but you can also turn it up to make it harder. And when you're playing with a group, which I find fun, I think it's way more fun playing with a group than it is solo, as is normal Minecraft, in my opinion. You're getting into an area of gameplay that they have designed exquisitely, because the game itself can be difficult when you turn up the difficulty, but this is combined with a really cool system that they have implemented into the game where when one person dies, it says like, hey, night is coming, and you have like 30 seconds to go and res that person. So you have to get to their body and you have to get them back up, which means that you're forced, or not forced, but you're encouraged heavily to play together, especially on harder difficulties. Because if one of you goes down halfway across the map, you're not going to get to that person in time to res them. And what happens is if that person dies in that 30 seconds, you lose a life. You have 3 lives by default going into a level. And if you lose a life, then you only have 2 remaining. But during that time, that countdown time that person is down, you are having enemies slowly spawn around you, making it more and more difficult. So you really don't want to go down at all if you can avoid it. And I like that because it means that you're encouraged to play as a team rather than spreading out and like farming things that are in a map. But I guess if you were doing speed farming type things and you just wanted to clear a map quickly and that was your goal, then yeah, spreading out is ideal. But if you're playing at a really high difficulty where you need to stay together, the game even just pushes you a little bit further to be encouraged to actually group up and play together. So overall, like, I think all of these systems work really, really well to make the game excellent. So let's wrap up my thoughts here a little bit, because again, I'm not going to talk about the story. I've only played the first few levels. It seems kind of Minecrafty. It's not my cup of tea, but the gameplay itself interests me heavily because, one, it's fun, right? At the baseline, like I said, if that's not fun, then the game's not going to be very good. Well, the baseline combat stuff is fun to play. The systems are deep and engaging, but they're also easy to learn and kind of hard to master, because once you get to the highest level gameplay where you're spending your enchantment points ideally, then you're going to be able to take your character exceptionally further compared to another player who just doesn't really engage with that system very much. And then on top of that, you have the group play that is really engaging as well. So all of this comes together to create an exciting game. Is it a game that currently, in its current state, what the stuff that I've played, I would play a couple 100 hours of, like I would any other normal action RPG for me? Yes, absolutely, because it's really fun. And for me, I've got kids now, and these kids are, we've let the oldest play Diablo, but the next youngest, we're not going to let play Diablo anytime soon, especially when Diablo 4 comes out. Like both of them aren't playing that. It is way too... It's cool. It's really cool for me, but it's not cool for them. But if, I can play Minecraft Dungeons with them, then I get that same experience of being able to play in an idyllic game with group play that has a lot of combat depth, but is easy to learn for them. Then I can do that, and that makes that way more exciting. So yeah, the game comes together in a really cool way, and I really, really like it. I'm excited to see what the full product looks like once it finally launches and what they do for updates over time. But this is a really cool take on the game, on Minecraft as a whole, and I love it. I really love what they've done with it. So far, I would absolutely recommend it, especially at launch. I think it's going to be pretty cool, if not a tiny bit buggy here and there, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty solid and definitely something to have fun with if you have kids or if you just want to play a good action RPG. But if you've jumped into the beta and have a chance to play, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think of the game? Let me know in the comments below. And with all of that being said, thank you guys for watching, and we shall see you guys next time.